I'm seeing a lot of videos and articles about the impending doom of the housing market, a tsunami of foreclosures, evictions by the millions, home prices dropping by 40%. There are a lot of doomsayers getting a lot of attention these days. Wouldn't it be interesting to take a fact-based look at the housing market instead? Now, I'm not here to tell you there's no doom and gloom in the future, and the opposite is true too. I'm not forecasting rainbows and daisies either. How about we just focus on the facts, and then you can draw some logical conclusions built upon these facts. Does that sound good? If so, stay tuned. We're going to take a look at 60 years of housing data, couple it with population growth trends, add a dab of real estate supply and demand, a twist of mortgage interest rates, and hopefully cook up a housing market summary that you can rely upon. Hi, I'm Joe Manausa, author of The Business of Getting Business and creator of Manausa.com, where I have helped tens of thousands of people buy and sell homes. I would like to help you too. If you already are a subscriber, thank you and welcome back. If you're not a subscriber, please consider doing so now. We offer the most accurate housing market reports on YouTube, plus answers to your real estate frequently asked questions, and we also provide virtual tours of some of the most beautiful homes in Tallahassee. Simply hit subscribe to get started and the bell so that you're the most informed buyer or seller in your next real estate transaction. Here are the facts that we're going to review. Fact 1. Home values will rise or fall based upon the relationship between supply and demand for those homes. That means that global changes are relevant, but it is the local market conditions that will determine the direction of home values. We can look at mortgage interest rates, a global factor, and know that they influence local demand. When interest rates decline, people can afford more home for their money, and we typically see demand rise. The opposite is true as well. When rates rise, people can afford less home for their money, thus demand falls. Over time, the market adapts to current mortgage interest rates and demand stabilizes. The economy is another global factor that has a long-term impact on most local economies, but a new change in the worldwide economy rarely impacts the local housing market. Why? Because local economies do not always move in sync with the national or global economy. If you live in an area where an industry is moving in, then you'll see a surge in new demand, regardless of the U.S. economy at that time. Of course, if factories are shutting down in your area, you can certainly expect to see demand decline. It is the continuous study of supply and demand that will aid you in forecasting value changes in the real estate market. This can be done at the national level, but you must know that local changes are all that will matter for your local housing market. Currently, the majority of housing markets are reporting inventory shortages. There are not enough homes for sale to satisfy demand. Now, here's an important point to consider if you are worried about home values crashing. What is the current rate of demand? How does it compare with times in the past? Does it seem real high or low right now? Not enough people were asking this question in 2005, when the housing market was surging and home prices were skyrocketing. So let's move on to the second fact that we should evaluate when forecasting housing price changes. Fact 2. The population is growing. As a general rule, a rising population needs more houses, while a declining population requires fewer houses. This one's pretty straightforward, but there are other variables that make this less than a black and white issue. For example, what is the current trend of people per units, or multi-family versus single-family living? I'm betting the eventual fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic will be a decline in the desirability of vertical living spaces, as well as most multifamily properties. I'm not saying it will go to zero, but you can certainly expect some percentage of people moving forward to favor social distancing as it applies to where they live. Now, back to the specific issue of population. The U.S. is growing. This is a fact, not rhetoric. Regardless of what your thoughts are on the future of home prices, you must concede that the fact that there are more people living in the U.S. today than there were last year. We are growing. According to population data distributed by the Federal Reserve, there are about 12% more people in the U.S. today than there were when the housing market began its collapse 15 years ago. To summarize the demand side of the equation, we know that the long-term demand trend is rising. Sure, there are plenty of short-term issues that will cause fluctuations, but it is clear that there are more people living in the U.S. than there were in the past, thus we expect the non-cyclical, long-term demand trend to rise. Fact 3. Mortgage interest rates are at an all-time low. While a growing population needs more homes, buyers buoyed by low mortgage interest rates can get more home for their money. I'm not going to spend much time on mortgage interest rates, but the fact that they are low is indisputable, and they are not likely to move a whole lot higher in the coming months or years while the world economies try to recover from this pandemic. Fact 4. There are two major components to the supply side of the U.S. housing market. Those are existing home sales and new home construction. If we take a very simplistic approach to this analysis, we can conclude that there are not enough existing homes to satisfy future demand because the population is rising. Of course, we might see times when this is not true due to an economic change, but so long as our population continues to rise, new homes need to be built. Again, we could see short-term trends have a huge impact on this in either direction. I see two conflicting possibilities. One is a likely trend away from multifamily due to a continued desire for social distancing. This could increase the demand for single-family homes. On the other hand, a spiral in the economy could push the trend towards more affordable multifamily properties and thus reduce demand for single-family homes. Ultimately, these conflicting needs should be considered when doing your own personal forecast for the future of home prices. So let's review the three facts that we have identified thus far. Number 1, supply and demand rule the housing market. The future of home prices will be tied to how many homes are available compared to how many are desired. Number 2, the U.S. population is rising, so ultimately the demand for homes is rising too. Number 3, the supply side of the housing market is filled with existing homes and newly built homes. My nearly 30 years of experience selling homes in Tallahassee, I can assure you that all three of these facts are true here as well. I know there are locations around the U.S. where populations have fallen, but not for most of the U.S. and for all of Tallahassee. The population is rising, and thus the demand for homes is rising. If you are in a location where the local population has declined, then the following analysis will not apply to you right now or to your local market. It does apply to Tallahassee and applies to the overall U.S. housing market too. I'm curious if you're in an area where the population is receding. If so, please let us know your location in the comment section below. Now, let's dig a little deeper into our analysis of the housing market based upon these three facts. Currently, the U.S. housing markets are undersupplied, and many people have come forward claiming that the pandemic has caused this problem. They claim that many home sellers have chosen to wait until the pandemic passes, and I can tell you that I have anecdotal evidence that supports this, having heard it directly from home sellers here in Tallahassee. But this is not the cause of our undersupply. This has only exacerbated the problem. The fact is, most U.S. housing markets had housing inventory shortages prior to COVID-19, and I believe I know why. The biggest problem in the U.S. housing market, and certainly in the Tallahassee real estate market, is that we have not built enough homes. 20 years ago, we started building too many homes, and without getting into a distracting discussion on why the housing market collapsed in 2006, it is undeniable that we overbuilt the market in an attempt to keep up with the puffed-up demand by speculating consumers. Eventually, that irrational demand receded, and finally new construction slowed to a near standstill in order for the market to consume the glut of homes remaining from this period of time. But the normal level of new construction of homes never returned. Even today, where the supply of homes is at an all-time low, we are still not building enough home for today's population growth fueled increase in demand. And do you want to know why? It's because builders can no longer deliver a home to the market at a price that the majority of today's buyers can pay. What most real estate reports do not mention is the fact that the minimum wage has risen 66% in Florida and 41% in the U.S. since the last expansion phase of the housing market. Now that we need more new homes today, the cost is significantly higher than it was to cost to build the homes back then. It is this huge difference between what builders can produce and what buyers can spend that has caused the huge supply imbalance. Even if the pandemic had not hit us, we would be facing market conditions where demand outraced supply. When we look at new construction starts and compare it with population change, we can clearly see that the U.S. is growing people faster than it is growing houses. This graph plots the ratio of population growth to housing starts. And what we see is that from 1960 through 2000, we typically build a home for every 1.76 people in growth. But in the past 20 years, that ratio has grown to one home for every 2.26 people in growth. The ratio has risen 28% higher than what we saw for the previous 40 years, and that's a strong sign that construction has slowed far too low. The easy solution is to build more homes. The hard part of this easy solution is to figure out how to do it at a price people can afford to pay while delivering a home that they actually want to buy. And this brings us back to the pandemic. The logical solution to creating more homes affordably is to build more multifamily and attached single-family homes. Yet the demand is likely to shift towards single-family detached dwellings. Let's look at another fact that the doomsayers are not mentioning when they warn of the coming foreclosure crisis. If you remember 2008 through 2016, then you probably know that foreclosures and short sales took over the housing market. Take a look at this graph of home sales in Tallahassee, and you'll see just how strongly distressed home sales impacted the market. In 2012, nearly 2 of every 5 homes sold was a distressed sale, and more than a quarter of all homes sold from 2010 through 2015 were distressed. It was tough sledding in the housing market for sure. But look at today. Equity has returned to the housing market, and distressed sales make up less than 2% of all homes sold. Doomsayers are forecasting a tsunami of foreclosures for our near future. Rather than let fear-mongering guide us, let's look at the facts as they are right now. First of all, a foreclosure sale does not just happen overnight. There's a process for a distressed home that it must go through. The first step in that process is the Lis Pendens filing, where the bank warns the homeowners to make good on their payments. This graph shows us the Lis Pendens filed in Tallahassee for the past 12 years. Notice that we're at an all-time low on this graph, though the numbers have bumped up recently, and we might be seeing the start of a new rising trend. Now, what happens to these homeowners if they do not come current on their loan? Well, historically in Tallahassee, the majority of people in this situation sold their homes on the open market instead of facing a foreclosure sale. Their homes had enough equity in them to pay the liens on the property. As you can see, it was uncommon for a home to make it to a foreclosure sale because equity existed for most of them. As you will see on the next graph, very few made it to a foreclosure sale. This is the graph of foreclosure sales in Tallahassee, and it's pretty amazing. Look at how consistent the foreclosure market was for the first 20 years. There was very little fluctuation with the number of foreclosure sales, averaging about 5 each month. Just 5 a month. Again, most homeowners who got into trouble had equity in their homes that resolved the delinquent liens on their property. But look what happened later when the housing market collapsed. Suddenly, foreclosure sales exploded up to an average of 130 each month. The doomsayers argue that it happened before, so it will happen again. Well, again, let's focus on the facts. This next graph shows us some very telling information. The graph contains information that the doomsayers are ignoring right now. There are 3 important pieces of information happening here. The green line shows the average home value, and you can see that the trend is approaching the high reached back in 2007. That was 13 years ago. The red line is the number of foreclosure sales that we identified on the previous graph. The third set of data, plotted in black, is the relative supply of homes measured in months of supply. A measure of 6.0 months is considered market equilibrium, where the market is a healthy balance of supply and demand. When the relative supply rose above 6 months, it became a buyer's market and home values dropped. In 2016, the market stabilized, but the builders did not step up their production, so we moved to a seller's market. With each year passing and builders not providing enough homes, the market has become an extreme seller's market, devoid of inventory at the price point where most buyers can afford to buy them. So what does this combination of these 3 bits of data tell us? It tells us that this is not 2006. In 2006, when banks started filing Lis Pendens, the very last thing the market needed was more inventory. It was already heavily glutted. Builders and investors who were not paying attention to the growing supply of homes got caught in a losing game of musical chairs. We saw home values plummet. We also saw foreclosures hit the market at that time, which means that people who needed to get rid of their homes suddenly saw all the equity disappear. The many years of additional foreclosures kept adding to the inventory and suppressing home values. Now, the doomsayers will tell you this is all about to happen again, and I concede it could happen, but not before a lot of other things happen first. Let's explore exactly what is happening now and why the market is poised to absorb a first round of foreclosures, unlike the market was in 2006. Right now, values are near where they were when the market collapsed 15 years ago. But unlike then, the market is not filled with irrational exuberance. The buyers in the market today are not speculating. They're buying for their own personal use. In fact, Even though our population has grown over the past 15 years, the number of home sales now remains lower than the number of homes sold during the housing market peak. Today's buyers are end users, not speculators. The market demand is healthy, and it's the supply side that is unhealthy. If you were to drop 500 foreclosures on the market today, they would be consumed immediately, as buyers in this undersupplied market are now awaiting new inventory. The competition for these additional homes means that we would not see values decline, as demand would still outweigh supply. Again, I promise to stick with the facts, and thus far I have, but now I will close with my opinion on the impending doom of the housing market. It's hype. It's fake news. It's easy to grab people's attention with headlines of gloom and doom, and it's effectively working to sell ad space online wherever a story can be told. Now, I'm not ruling out a housing market collapse, but I promise we'll see it coming when the supply of homes for sale starts to rise towards alarming levels. The last collapse started in 2006, and it took nearly 3 years for the banks to push foreclosures en masse to the market. Were the total economy to go bust, and it could, it would take longer this time around. Remember, the banks don't want the houses. They want their money. They are in it just as much as the homeowners. Thus far, we aren't seeing the zombie apocalypse in real estate. If you keep your eye on our YouTube channel, you'll get regular housing market reports that will forewarn you of any demise long before it happens. Just click on the subscribe button below and you'll be the first to know of any factual market changes. This video is already one of the longest I've ever recorded, and I want to wrap it up. I would love to see the discussion further in the comments section below. So if you think I missed something, please go below, make a comment, and let me know. And whether or not you agree with me, surely I've earned a thumbs up for this video, right? Please like this video and let YouTube know it's a video worth sharing across its network. Remember to subscribe to our channel so that you know about the housing market changes as they occur. In fact, at the top left is our median home sales report showing median home prices and home values in the Tallahassee real estate market. Check it out or get answers to your real estate frequently asked questions by clicking on the box below it.